first time I drank, I got drunk. And I vividly remember being invited to a party. I was in the 7th grade, and a friend of mine's sister bought us a pint of Old Forester, and there were 4 of us boys. We went under a bridge right on the way to this party and twisted the top off of it, and I watched the first 2 boys open it, take a sip, both of them spit it out. It burned their mouth, said, "Oh, this stuff is awful." And I said, "Here, give it to me." And I distinctively remember taking a big swallow, swallowing it, it burned going down, but all of a sudden I was warm inside. And I said, "This is great, give me that bottle." My 3 friends that were there were all amazed. They said, "You like that stuff?" And I said, "That's nothing wrong with this." And I proceeded to drink almost all of the bottle myself. We went on to a party. I proceeded to get sick, get all kinds of attention at the party, with vomit all over myself. I was taken home that night. I was met by my mother. She asked what happened, and it was the start of a lot of enabling that was very characteristic of my relationship with my mother, because when I told her I'd been drinking, I said, "Someone spiked the punch," and she said, "Oh, you poor baby, come in here, let me give you an aspirin, an Alka-Seltzer, go to sleep." I woke up the next morning. She met me with an aspirin and a glass of water, and it was not my fault. It was somebody else's fault, and I learned how to make my behavior somebody else's fault and not be responsible from that point on. And after that, anytime I drank to get drunk. I remember I'd get up when I was in college, and I'd go into the bathroom, and I'd look in the mirror, and I looked like I felt like, and I'd say, "This stuff's just got to stop. You can't go on like that." And then I'd say, "Yeah, but not today." And I had no hope. I had nowhere to go. One of the sad things is I'd sit around with my roommates, and we had these pathetic dreams. Oh yeah, someday one of my roommates thought he was going to get a trust fund at 30, and he said, "I'm going to get this yacht, and it's going to be you and me on the yacht, when I'm 30. And I'm thinking, dude, I ain't going to make 30, at the rate I'm going. I really didn't think I was, but the dreams that I had and the outlooks were just sad, very pitiful. At Thanksgiving of that year, I was to go home and see my mom, and at this point, I knew enough to know if I took anything, I could not predict my behavior. And so I had not taken anything at all for 2 days. I'd gone cold turkey, because anytime I took a drink of alcohol or took a drug, I could not tell you where I was going to end up or when it would stop. And we went down to my grandparents' bay house for Thanksgiving dinner. As I came out of this seizure, my grandmother had her hands laid on me, and she was praying. My family was around me, and I really thought I'd died and was in heaven or something. It was so strange, but I'll never forget looking around and seeing my brothers and sister and mother and grandmother, and seeing the hurt and the pain in their eyes. And I didn't care about myself at this point. I wish I had died, but I still had a conscience, and I could look at them and see that they cared about me, and that I'd hurt them very much, and they were scared and didn't know what to do. So I went up. We had Thanksgiving dinner, a little bit quiet around the table, that meal, and my mother took me to the hospital the next morning for a full physical and to be checked out and see what caused these seizures. And I was given a anticonvulsant drug to start taking to do it, and the doctor, you didn't have to be real perceptive, but he noticed holes in my arms, my physical condition, and he told my mother, he said, "Your son is a drug addict and he needs help." I immediately minimized the situation, because in my mind it was the alcohol and the drugs that were keeping my life together, not blowing it apart. I could not imagine sober or living without alcohol and drugs to keep me going. And so that night I went home, every intention to stay home, do nothing. 2 of my good old friends called. "It's your birthday. You gotta go out for a little while. Don't worry, we won't do anything." I begged my mom, "I'll be home at 11. Don't worry about a thing." I'm going out with, with my bros, and it'll all be good. And I went out, and that was my intention, to be back at 7 o'clock. The next day, I guess I made it home about 9 o'clock in the morning, and my mother was sitting at the breakfast room table. And I'll never forget it, because usually I would come in and it would be a confrontation, explaining, denial, blaming, that sort of thing. And she looked at me, and she had that same look she had when I came out of that seizure, and I could see the pain and the hurt in my mother, who I loved very deeply, even though I wasn't acting like it. And she just literally slid me a letter, a handwritten letter, and in those days they wrote with these pens with an ink cartridge, and she had written this long letter, and it was tear stained. And she said, "I don't know what to do with you. You're very sick. I cannot have you in this house anymore, and until you get some help or do something, and I don't have any resources to do it, don't come back." And she put $100 in there, and I laughed it off, took the $100, went down to the bad side of town in Houston and bought drugs and went back to Austin. I'd been back in Austin about 2 days, I guess so, and classes had just started. And one afternoon when I was there, I was sitting, we had our apartment was kind of college decorated. It was like 2 tires with an old door on it, and we were sitting around the table at 3 in the afternoon, full ashtrays, beer bottles, about to smoke a joint. And I looked across the sliding glass door up in Austin, and I saw my father scamper by. Well, my father and I hadn't hardly even spoken in a couple of years. He was so disgusted with me and my behavior, didn't know what to do. The room is completely smoke-filled, pot, cigarettes, stale beer, all that. Knock on the door, and he comes in, and, "Hey, how you guys doing?" I've never seen him like this. He was completely friendly, said hi to my friend, said, "I just came up to see, I need to talk to Pat. Is he here?" And I was in the bathroom just shaking, what's going to happen? And he said, "Pat, I've driven up here." He said, "I'd like to talk to you for a few minutes if that's all right." And he said in a very nice, non-threatening way. I said, "Okay." And I was in Austin because I was going to the University of Texas, and we walked out of the apartments over to a little hill, and we sat down. And he started doing some of the talking, and he said, he said, "I don't know what's wrong with you." He said, "But last night I was watching TV, and a phone number came on for a place called Crisis Hotline, and I called it, and I told them about you, and they put me in touch with a program called Palmer Drug Abuse Program, and I called them and told them about you." And he said, "I don't know anything about drugs or this sort of thing, but they told me you don't have to Christmas, and if you don't get some help, you might die." And I wanted to discount that and say, "Oh, you're exaggerating, that's not right." But he had enough knowledge and information about the problem that I knew he was right. And he said, "Listen," he said, "I've talked to these people, and I want you to go talk to them. And if they say everything's okay," he said, "I'll put you on a plane. You can be back tomorrow." He said, "I got an appointment with them tomorrow morning at 11, and if they say everything's okay, you can come back. I'll give you your allowance, and then we'll deal with it later." And I said, "Well," I'm sitting there thinking, I'm scared, looking for a way out. And then he said one more thing. He said, "I love you, and I want to help you."